Hi, Dan Thies back for Link Liberation number 3, week 3, practice module number 1, video number 4, Link Liberation from scratch, the routine. This is how we do it. As in, how we do it step by step. And unfortunately, you have a lot of choices here. And in fact, the tools that you use and how you use them will vary to some extent based on how many people you have working on it. I'm sorry that there are so many choices. I'm sorry there are so many tools that you can use. If you're feeling lazy, you can just use the tools that I use, which is an iPad-based workflow for most of this, or you can just use a browser-based workflow, which is pretty easy for one or even a few people to do. The important thing here is to get the job done, which is selecting stories and sharing them with your audience and managing all the @replies and retweets and direct messages, that what I call the social stuff that we're doing in our audience building. Let's start with that iPad-based workflow, and so I'd like to introduce you to a little friend of mine named Mr. Reader. This is an iPad app that costs $3.99. You can look at the website here. It's curioustimes.de/Mr. Reader. You can also just, of course, search the App Store for Mr. Reader. Now, once you get this app, setup actually means the first thing you're going to do is sign in with your Google Reader account. Once you do that, all of your feeds will sync down to the device. So it will bring all of your subscriptions onto the device, and you can actually manage subscriptions there, unsubscribe and add subscriptions right there in the app. And it will also pull in all the items from the feeds the first time. And now you can actually do stuff with the feeds that you're looking at in there. The reason why I use Mr. Reader as opposed to some other alternatives is that Mr. Reader, in addition to supporting Twitter and Delicious, which a lot of them do, like say Reader or Newsrack, but Mr. Reader is one of the few that actually supports Buffer and already has Buffer built in, and I need that for what I'm doing. In fact, for now, what we're doing in this section of the course, I'm really just using Buffer inside of Mr. Reader. So I'm reading stuff and using Buffer to set up tweets. But like I said, you can also actually add feeds and unsubscribe to them in the app. So you could actually just take all of the stuff that you tagged as stories and sources and then go in and use Mr. Reader to find as many feeds as you can and subscribe to them in the app. It's not the most efficient place to do that, and I really vastly prefer to do that in a web browser. But in a pinch, if all I had was an iPad, I could do it there too. So here's what we're going to do in Mr. Reader, and we're going to do it in a very specific order. So the first step we're going to do is go through and add a star. You just push the little star icon on anything that's already tagged as story in Delicious. So I look at my RSS feed from Delicious with the tag of story, and I just add a star to all those items that are in there. That's something that you can do super quick. The second step I'm going to do, and this is something that you will do as sort of your ongoing activity here, is read through the unread items from all of your feeds and star the ones that you like. The third step then is to go through the starred items that we have and actually set up the tweets and put them into Buffer. This order is very efficient, and it's also very beneficial, because by going through the unread items and starring them and then going through the stories that we have and starring those, and then and only then going through and actually tweeting up the stories that we've added a star to, that sort of randomizes the order. So you don't end up, if you're going through a feed of everything's about dog training and a feed about everything that's about animal welfare, and the next feed is everything is about dog health, you don't want to have 10 tweets in a row go out that are about training or about health and stuff like that. You'd like them to be mixed up, and by doing this process, they're actually mixed up because they're listed in chronological order. It is also, of course, just very, very much more efficient to give your brain one job at a time to do that job for a while, take a break, do the next job. You can do this stuff in very, very little time. Maybe a 5-minute sprint through each of those steps, and maybe 10 minutes of writing your tweets if you're going to do a whole bunch of them in one day. But literally, it doesn't take that long. You can also do the same workflow in your web browser, right? You can do it in Google Reader. So you can go in Google Reader, read through stuff, and just like we did before, you can go through everything that's tagged as a story in Delicious, open it in a tab, and then go back and add a star in Reader on the things that you wanted to share. Now, a productivity tip here. If you're going to do this in a browser, start with a clean browser. Don't go in where you've already got 50 tabs open and all kinds of stuff open and start opening up new tabs. Start with a clean browser window with nothing in it but Google Reader, and then start opening up tabs and work from there. Now, Buffer has both bookmarklets and also a browser plugin that you can use for most browsers. So you can actually, once you have the item open and you've decided you're going to use it, you could actually skip the starring step and just send it straight out into the buffer. I recommend that you use the starring process because we're going to use those starred items later, hint, hint, in weeks 4 and 5 to help us create content. So you can do it in a browser. So why do I use the iPad at all? Well, I use it for two things, speed and convenience. But I will admit, mostly it's about convenience. Mostly it's about having a device that's just a screen that only has one thing on it. There isn't going to be a Skype chat pop up where one of my coworkers needs my help. There isn't going to be a sound going off because a new email came in. There's nothing like that going on the iPad. I can do one job, I can do it all the way through, and I can do it very quickly. In fact, to come up with about 50 stories to put into my buffer took me about 20 minutes just by going through the feeds that I had added. And that's enough for almost 2 weeks in 20 minutes. That's why I use the iPad. Plus, it lets me sit on the couch and drink a cup of coffee while I'm doing it. I'm not afraid of spilling that on a keyboard. So here's what it actually looks like in Mr. Reader when I'm looking at an item. There's actually a set of tabs across the top. There's one for RSS and there's one for the web. And most of the time you can just hit the share button. That's the little box and arrow thing that you can see enlarged on the screen here at the bottom of the screen on your iPad. And when you push that, there's a number of options. You can tweet, you can delicious, you can buffer, which is what we're trying to do here. Now, if you'll notice here, the one that I'm sharing is the one that I added in a previous video where I wrote buy at PetWriter in my delicious description, and you can see that that comes all the way through here into my reader. That means that when I tweet, I can add buy at PetWriter to it, and at PetWriter will know that I tweeted out a link to her story on the newspaper site. So here I am doing it. I hit the buffer button, and it's really, really fast to do this here in most of the better Reader applications. Reader is another one, NewsRack is another one, where you can just click the title button and the link button and get the title and link just stuck in there. And then you can say whatever else you want to say. In this case, I just added the title, Dogs May Mourn as Deeply as Humans Do, added the link, and then I typed buy at PetWriter, and I'm done. I can buffer that sucker up, and I'm ready to do that. And you can jam through this. You can literally do a week or 2 weeks worth of stuff in about 20 minutes using a dedicated Reader app like this. If you average that out, that's really only a few minutes a day on average. Now, I don't recommend that you do this every day, 3 minutes at a time to do this kind of story collection. But once you've found the stories and the sources and you have RSS feeds coming in, it is remarkably easy and laughably in terms of the little amount of time that you have to put in. It's laughably easy to do. Okay, but what about all that social stuff that we do, right? We still have to manage the other stuff that we're doing on Twitter because just pumping out stories isn't going to be the most effective way to build an audience. So let's review what we're doing. Now, if there are new stories that are in your tweet stream, that is the people that you're following, or if you have lists of people, and if you're looking at the tweets just from that list, then use those. Tweet those out or retweet the tweet from the person that posted the story. And if you are finding that nobody that you're following is sharing interesting stories, well, there are a couple ways you can do that. First of all, you'll probably want to find some different people to follow, but that takes time. You can also use back tweets to look at the stories that you're getting ready to share, things that are maybe already in your buffer, and go find people that have tweeted them so then you can follow that person and then retweet them instead of tweeting it out yourself directly. And if that fails, you can retweet stuff that doesn't have a link. People will spout off opinions, they'll send out inspirational quotes and stuff like that. As long as it's something that makes sense that somebody else would say, wow, I think I'll share that with people. You can retweet stuff that doesn't have a link in it. You don't have to only retweet links to stories from people. And you also then want to manage your direct messaging and replies. So if you have new followers, and by the way, if you set it up right, you'll get an email that says you've got a new follower. And early on, you'll want to be doing that because it gives you a little bit of encouragement when you get those emails. You want to follow them back unless they're obviously some kind of a spam bot, which you don't need to bother with. And then you want to send them a direct message that just says something like, hey, thanks for following and that. So if it's just somebody that appears to be interested in the topic and they're following you because they're interested in hearing stuff about the topic, then just say, thanks for following. Let me know if there's anything you'd like us to tell you about, anything you'd like us to do. If it's somebody that's actively sharing stories and producing content, then say, hey, thanks for following. And if you ever need something retweeted, just let me know and I'll do it. Because that actually saves you work and it does them a favor if they ever take you up on it. So what do I use for that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. First of all, I'm always using Buffer here. Okay, so I stay signed in. I have the browser plugins in there so that I can buffer stuff right there in twitter.com, because twitter.com is where I actually go to do all of my social stuff on their website, because it's, to me, absolutely the best interface to do it with. I haven't found a good client that makes it as easy as just doing the stuff right there on twitter.com. And yes, people have asked, and yes, you can buffer retweets, but keep in mind that you need to know how that actually works. You don't want to retweet someone today and have that retweet show up 8 weeks from now if you've got 8 weeks worth of stuff in your buffer. So yeah, you can go into the buffer website and you can actually bump the retweets up, so you can just drag them from 3 days from now onto today, and so they'll actually happen. It's easy enough to do. And that also, if you're doing it all at once, it helps you avoid having like 3 days straight where you're doing nothing but retweet. But you'd want, like most of your retweets, to happen more or less within a day or so of when the person tweeted the thing out originally. And this is one of those places where I'm sorry, but the social stuff is a lot more effective in audience building if you actually do it every day. But again, you're talking about a few minutes a day of just going in there, managing your new followers, replying to people, sending them direct messages, replying to anybody that sends you an app message, and retweeting a few things. It's not that hard. It only takes a few minutes. And if you go in today and there's nothing to retweet, that's okay, because if you have a few things in your buffer, you can always bump those up so that you always appear to have that kind of activity going on in your stream. So what's the end result? Well, looky here. I've got a full buffer, and I've got this thing set up to have 4 tweets a day in the buffer on weekdays and 2 tweets a day on the weekends. And that's because I'm not using Buffer to retweet. What I'm doing when I want to retweet somebody is I'm logged into Twitter, I'm looking at stuff, and I just send out, it might even be 2 or 3 or 4 retweets in a row. It might annoy a few people, it might not. Usually I'm only retweeting 1 or 2 things a day, but what it does do is it lets me do it right away. And the thing is, most of the people that are seeing the retweet are not looking at your entire activity stream. So it doesn't matter that you just sent out another tweet and they see it. In fact, for most people, it doesn't matter if you send out 2 tweets in a row. What gets annoying is if you've got somebody you're following that's posting 40 or 50 tweets a day, and that's more than all of your friends put together. And as you can see, if you squint real hard at the screen, I've actually got a few retweets that are in the buffer here just so you can see what it looks like. That's it. That's how I'm running the whole audience building show with this business. 20 minutes a week, maybe 30 tops, and I'm done. And I can do it all on my iPad, in my browser on my iPad, or in apps on my iPad, where it's something where I can just pick it up, do a little bit of work for 3 or 4 minutes, and then put it down. And it works out great for me because this is something that I'm trying to do in my spare time, in my spare moments, while I'm waiting for somebody to call me back on the phone or something like that. I can just grab my iPad and get a little bit of work done. It works great for me. It might work great for you, but you don't have to use the iPad. You don't have to use Android. You don't have to use Linux or anything, because you can do it all in a web browser, and you can get a web browser just about anywhere. Next up, we'll have a couple more videos. The market case studies is quite a bit of content, and the Link Liberation 3 implementation guide, which is a short video that walks you through the PDF that is part of the extras, the Link Liberation implementation guide document that you'll be building as you go through the course.